The Galactic Council's grand chamber was alive with activity. Beings from across the stars filled the large space representing different worlds, each species with its own unique form. Some were tall, with glowing eyes and armored skin, while others were small and insect-like, their faces covered in thin layers of chitin. The hum of conversation echoed through the chamber as diplomats shuffled into their seats, preparing for the historic meeting. It was a day many had been waiting for, the first official peace talks between humanity and the galaxy. At the front of the room stood Ambassador Tarkin, the leader of the human delegation. His calm expression was a reflection of the months of preparation and training that had gone into this moment. The stakes were high. Humanity had earned its place at this table, but it was still a new presence in the galaxy, and not all the species here were eager to welcome Earth with open arms. As the doors of the chamber closed, the final representatives took their seats. The Ivari, an ancient species known for their wisdom, controlled the council. Their chairperson, a towering figure named Zelra, nodded at Tarkin. "Welcome, Ambassador Tarkin." Zelra's voice resonated with the weight of years, yet there was a sharpness to it as they looked over the human delegation. "The council is eager to hear what humanity brings to the table." Tarkin nodded back, a slight smile on his face. "Thank you, Chairperson Zelra. Humanity comes in peace, seeking to create lasting alliances and promote stability across the galaxy." The room fell silent as the different representatives turned their attention toward Tarkin. Many of the species had heard of Earth, but they had never seen humans in person. The stories of their rise, of how Earth had gone from a fragile planet to one capable of space exploration in mere centuries, had spread across the galaxy. But despite their impressive growth, humans were still viewed with suspicion. Tarkin stepped forward, taking his place at the podium. "Humanity's history has been one of hardship, but also one of progress," he continued. "We have learned from our mistakes and now seek to learn from the greater galaxy. We offer our cooperation, our knowledge, and our strength to all who seek peace." The first murmur of voices rose from the gathered delegates. Not everyone seemed convinced. The Zelkai, a race of insectoid beings known for their sharp intellects, exchanged knowing glances. Lord Zurin, the leader of the Zelkai delegation, stood and addressed the assembly. "Ambassador Tarkin, you speak of peace," Lord Zurin said, his voice smooth but with an underlying sharpness. "But we have heard that humanity's military power has grown rapidly. How do you expect us to believe that you come with peaceful intentions when your warships outnumber many of our fleets?" The room grew tense. Eyes turned from Tarkin to Lord Zurin, then back to Tarkin again. This was the challenge Tarkin had expected. He took a breath, keeping his voice steady. "Our military is a defense mechanism," Tarkin replied. "We do not seek to dominate or control others, but we will protect ourselves if necessary. Our presence here today is a testament to our willingness to seek peace, not war." But it wasn't enough. The Drashni, a race of reptilian creatures known for their brutal nature, stood up next. Varric, their leader, had a cold, calculating gaze. "Humanity's military power is a threat, not a promise," he growled. "If you come here to preach peace, then why bring such weapons with you? Why not show us the true nature of humanity? One that doesn't rely on force." Tarkin could feel the weight of their skepticism pressing on him. This was not going as smoothly as he had hoped. "We understand your concerns, Varric," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I assure you our strength is not meant to intimidate. We seek to form alliances, not take over. Humanity's history has shown that we do not expand without reason, and our focus is on mutual cooperation." Still, the tension in the room only seemed to grow. The alien representatives whispered among themselves, and the atmosphere became thick with distrust. It was clear that the humans' reputation preceded them, and many species were not so eager to embrace them. Then, a soft voice broke through the growing tension. It was the representative from the Mervax, a species of beings with delicate wings and glowing patterns on their skin. "Perhaps we should give humanity a chance," she suggested. "We have seen their capabilities, And they have come in peace, as they say. Let us not judge them solely by their past. Her words offered a small moment of respite, but the damage had been done. The Drashni and Zelkai representatives were not easily swayed. The entire room shifted uneasily, and it was clear the meeting was on the edge of failure. Tarkin glanced at his fellow diplomats, each of them giving him a reassuring nod. They were all in this together, but the weight of the moment was heavy. He knew that one wrong word could send this entire assembly into chaos. Chairperson Zelra, Tarkin said, addressing the leader of the council once more, I understand the doubts you have about humanity, but we are here because we believe in the possibility of cooperation. We believe that peace can be achieved if we are willing to work together. Zelra, still watching him closely, nodded slowly. Your words are bold, Ambassador Tarkin, but words alone are not enough. Your actions must match them. Tarkin's heart raced. This was the moment. Then we will prove ourselves through our actions. We will show that humanity stands for peace, not war. We will build trust, one step at a time. But as Tarkin spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that the council was not ready to listen. The Zelkai, the Drashni, and other species had already made up their minds. The mistrust was too deep. The rest of the meeting continued in a tense atmosphere, the discussions becoming increasingly heated. With every passing moment, Tarkin realized that the opportunity for peace was slipping through their fingers. Humanity had come here with hope, but now it seemed their future in the galaxy would be much harder to secure than they had imagined. The Galactic Council chamber felt colder now, the air thick with distrust. Ambassador Tarkin had hoped to open a path to peace, but instead, the room was filled with doubts. As the Council's discussion dragged on, the weight of the accusations against humanity grew heavier with every passing moment. The Drashni, Zelkai, and the other species in the room exchanged harsh words, their voices filled with suspicion and uncertainty. Tarkin stood at the center of the room, the pressure mounting on his shoulders. The earlier exchange with Lord Zuran and Varric had shaken him, but he knew he had to stay composed. Every word he spoke now was critical, but it was becoming clear that the Council was not ready to listen to humanity's plea for peace. The Drashni representative, Varric, was the first to rise again. His reptilian eyes flickered with malice as he addressed the Council. The humans come here with their military might on full display, and yet they expect us to believe that they seek peace? Varric's voice was dripping with skepticism. They speak of cooperation, but their actions tell a different story. A tense silence followed his words. Tarkin could feel the weight of the room on him, the stares from every corner of the chamber digging into him like daggers. The distrust was thick, and no matter how much Tarkin tried to explain humanity's peaceful intentions, it seemed like no one was truly listening. Lord Zuran of the Zelkai stood next. His angular, insectoid face twitched with irritation. Perhaps Varric is right, Zuran said, his voice measured but cold. Humanity's so-called peaceful intentions do not match the growing strength of their military. They bring ships capable of devastating entire fleets, yet they claim to only defend. How can we believe them? How can we trust a species that hides behind weapons? Tarkin clenched his fists. His jaw tightened, but he knew he couldn't afford to lose his cool now. We are not here to threaten anyone, he said, his voice calm but firm. Our military strength is a means of protection, nothing more. We seek to form alliances, not control anyone. The galaxy has seen the horrors of war, and humanity wants to avoid that at all costs. But it was as if his words fell on deaf ears. The representatives of other species exchanged knowing glances, some nodding in agreement with the accusations against humanity. Tarkin had hoped that his calm demeanor and rational words would break the wall of suspicion. But instead, it felt like every word only added to the doubt that was already swirling in the air. From the far side of the room, a voice interrupted the growing tension. It was Lyra, the Mervax delegate, a species known for their peaceful nature. The Mervax had long sought to avoid conflict and promote understanding. Lyra stood, her delicate wings fluttering gently as she addressed the assembly. Ambassador Tarkin is not wrong, Lyra said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. Humanity has faced struggles of their own. They have seen war firsthand, and they seek to ensure it doesn't spread across the galaxy. Their intentions are genuine. They are not here to conquer us. The room fell silent again. Some of the delegates nodded, but others remained unmoved. The distrust had festered for too long, and one voice of reason could not change that. Tarkin could feel his patience wearing thin. It was clear that the Council had already decided that humanity was a threat, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The accusations kept flying, with each new one more damaging than the last. Humanity was being painted as the enemy, despite the peaceful overtures they had made. "I am not here to defend our military," Tarkin said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "But I will defend our right to exist. We are not asking for war. We are asking for a chance to prove that we can be a force for good in the galaxy. We want peace, just as much as any of you do." But even as he spoke, Tarkin could see the expressions of the delegates hardening. The damage had been done. The seeds of distrust had been planted, and there was no easy way to remove them. Lord Zuran spoke once more. "You ask for trust, but what have you done to earn it?" he demanded. "Your history is filled with conflict. How can we expect you to change now? How can we trust a species that has fought wars for centuries? How can we trust humans who have only just arrived on the galactic stage?" Tarkin's heart sank as the room erupted into murmurs. He had known this would not be easy, but he hadn't expected such a swift collapse of diplomacy. It was becoming painfully clear that the Council was not going to accept humanity's presence here. Not today. Not ever. "I see now that you are unwilling to listen," Tarkin said, his voice steady, though the frustration simmered beneath the surface. "We came here in good faith. We came here to offer peace. But it seems that the galaxy is not ready for that peace. If that is the case, then perhaps we should leave before things escalate further." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tarkin felt the eyes of every delegate upon him. Some looked at him with sympathy, but most seemed relieved by his statement. The atmosphere in the room shifted again, but this time it wasn't the quiet tension of diplomacy. It was the coldness of finality. Selra, the chairperson of the Council, glanced at Tarkin with a look of disappointment. "If you wish to leave, Ambassador, then the door is open. But know this. Your departure will have consequences. The Council will not forget the mistrust you have sown." Tarkin's gaze hardened. He wasn't afraid of the consequences. Humanity had made its choice, and if the Council was not willing to stand by their word, then it was time for them to go. Without another word, Tarkin turned and motioned for the human delegation to follow him. The door to the chamber slid open with a quiet hiss, and the humans began to file out. Their departure marked the end of any hope for diplomacy, at least for now. As the door closed behind them, Tarkin felt a mix of emotions. He was angry, disappointed, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had stood firm, and now they would face the galaxy on their own terms. The doors to the Galactic Council chamber slid shut behind Ambassador Tarkin and his team. The hum of the massive doors closing was the only sound that filled the air. Inside, the room was filled with murmurs and quiet conversations, but outside, Tarkin felt a heavy silence descend over him. They had left the council meeting. The peace talks had ended before they even truly began, with the harsh rejection from the other species still ringing in his ears. The human delegation stood in the hallway, exchanging uncertain glances. Some of the younger diplomats looked confused, while others, like Tarkin, felt a burning frustration. "What now, Ambassador?" One of the diplomats, a young man named Drayden, asked. His face was pale and his voice was tight with worry. "Do we really leave just like that?" Tarkin clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "We don't leave. Not yet," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We have one more card to play. But first, we need to make sure the Council knows that humanity will not be pushed around." Drayden looked uncertain, but Tarkin's unwavering confidence seemed to reassure him. He turned and led the way back to the command center, a small, secure room where they could regroup and plan their next move. The quiet murmur of voices faded as the door slid closed behind them. Inside, a large holographic display glowed with the galaxy's map, showing the positions of Earth's fleet and the vast array of star systems that made up the galaxy. "Let's talk strategy," Tarkin began, his tone serious. "We need to send a message to the Council, one they'll understand. It's clear they don't take humanity seriously, and that's a mistake." The other diplomats gathered around him, all eyes on Tarkin, who stood in front of the display. He tapped a few buttons, and the map zoomed in on the Earth's fleet. It was smaller than the fleets of some of the other galactic powers, but it was no less formidable. The fleet was new, rapidly built and bristling with the latest human technology. Tarkin's hand hovered over the fleet's location on the map, and for a moment, he felt the weight of his decision. Humanity was at a crossroads. They had fought so hard to be included in the Council, but now they were being dismissed. And if the Council wouldn't listen to reason, then perhaps they needed to hear another language. The language of strength. "We'll make a statement," Tarkin said, his voice steady. "We'll show the Council that humanity is not weak. We're not just a new species looking for a seat at the table. We're here to stay, and if the Council wants to ignore us, that's their choice." "What exactly are you proposing?" Drayden asked, his voice full of concern. "We won't fire first," Tarkin said, "but we'll show them what humanity is capable of." He looked around at the faces of his fellow diplomats. "We'll send a warning shot, something that makes it clear that humanity is not to be underestimated. It's time the Council understands that we're not just a fledgling species, we're a force to be reckoned with." There was a long pause. The room was silent save for the soft hum of the holographic display. The other diplomats exchanged uneasy looks, unsure of what to think. Finally, one of the older diplomats, a woman named Celine, spoke up. "I understand what you're saying." "Ambassador," she said, her voice calm but firm, "but a warning shot could escalate things. If we show our strength too soon, we risk pushing the Council into a corner. They might retaliate, and we could find ourselves in a war we're not prepared for." Tarkin nodded. "I understand the risks, Celine, but we have no choice. If we back down now, we'll lose any hope of ever being taken seriously. The Council has already shown us that they don't believe in peaceful coexistence. They believe in power. And if we don't stand up for ourselves now, we will be at the mercy of the other species forever." Celine didn't respond immediately, but Tarkin could see the doubt in her eyes. The room fell silent again, the weight of their decision hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Celine spoke. "I won't argue with you, Ambassador," she said softly. "But we must be careful. The last thing we want is to appear like the aggressors. We must show strength, but we must do so in a way that does not provoke an all-out war." Tarkin stood still, considering her words. He knew that Celine was right. A full-scale war would be disastrous for humanity, and the Council would view it as proof that humans could not be trusted. But something had to be done. The galaxy had to understand that humanity was not going to bow down to alien powers. "We'll make our statement, but we'll do it in a way that keeps the peace," Tarkin said after a long moment. "We'll send a signal to the Council, one they'll understand, but we'll stop short of crossing that line." He turned back to the holographic display, his finger hovering over a particular system. "This system here," he said, pointing at a remote planet near the edge of galactic space. "It's uninhabited, far from any trade routes, and there's no strategic value to it. We'll send a fleet to perform a military exercise there. We'll fire a few warning shots, nothing dangerous, but enough to make it clear that humanity will not be ignored." The room was still, the diplomats considering his plan. Finally, Celine spoke again. "It's a risk, Ambassador," she said quietly, "but it's also our only chance to make our presence known." Tarkin nodded. "We'll move fast. We won't give them time to react. And we'll make sure they understand that we're not here to conquer or control. We're here to stand on equal footing." The diplomats began to discuss the details of the plan, preparing for the next phase. As Tarkin watched them, a sense of resolve began to settle over him. He knew the consequences of their actions, but he also knew that humanity had to make its mark on the galaxy. The Council had rejected them, and now humanity would show them what it meant to be underestimated. The following day, the atmosphere in the Human Command Center was filled with anticipation and unease. Ambassador Tarkin sat in his office, looking out at the stars beyond. The fleet was preparing for its demonstration, a show of strength to send a clear message to the Galactic Council. The target was a barren system on the outskirts of known space, far from any inhabited planets or trade routes. It seemed harmless enough, a place where they could fire their warning shots without risking civilian lives or drawing the Council's wrath. But Tarkin knew this wasn't going to be a simple exercise. The Council was already watching them closely, and whatever happened next could change the future of humanity. Tarkin's second-in-command, Commander Rhea, entered the room. She was tall with dark hair tied back tightly, her uniform crisp and sharp. Her eyes were steady, but the tension in her voice was undeniable. "Ambassador, the fleet is ready," Rhea said. "The ships are in position, and we're waiting for your command. But I need to know, are you sure about this? Once we fire, there's no turning back. The Council will know that we are not playing around." Tarkin looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had come to trust Rhea over the years, and her concern echoed his own. But his decision had been made. Humanity could not be ignored any longer. "I'm sure," Tarkin said, his voice firm. "We need them to understand that we will stand up for ourselves. We've asked for peace, but we've been met with rejection and suspicion. This is the only way to force their hand." Rhea nodded silently, clearly not convinced but accepting his decision. She turned to leave but paused by the door. "I just hope we're ready for the consequences. The Council won't take this lightly." Tarkin remained silent for a moment, staring at the star-filled expanse before him. Rhea's words stayed with him, but there was nothing more he could do. Humanity's future was now in motion. He had to trust in the strength of their resolve. The human fleet began to move toward the designated system. Tarkin remained in constant communication with the commanders aboard the ships. His eyes narrowed as the distant planet grew larger on the holographic display in front of him. He could already imagine the Council's reaction when they received the news. As the first ship in the fleet, an imposing battleship called the Vanguard, crossed the outer edge of the system, the fleet's commanders received the signal to prepare for the warning shot. The crew aboard the Vanguard was calm, knowing that this was not an attack but rather a test of strength. They were about to fire their main weapon, not to destroy but to make a statement. The energy coils on the ship hummed as they powered up. Tarkin's fingers drummed lightly on the arm of his chair. A moment later, the message came through. The Vanguard had fired. The massive cannon on the ship released a powerful blast, its energy bright enough to illuminate the space around them. The shot hurtled through the void, landing on the barren planet below. The impact shook the empty surface, sending up a burst of dust and debris into the airless atmosphere. It was a spectacle, a loud reminder to the galaxy that humanity had arrived. Tarkin stood up, watching the display in front of him. His heart pounded, the anticipation now mixed with a sense of dread. What would the Council think? How would they react? Back in the Council chambers, the delegates had just resumed their debate over the failed peace talks. The atmosphere was tense as species argued amongst themselves, some still unwilling to accept humanity's presence. Then, the door to the chamber opened, and the Ivari chairperson, Zel-Ra, entered, a look of concern on their ancient face. "Something has happened," Zel-Ra said, their voice carrying across the room. "A message from the human fleet." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the holographic display that flickered to life. On it, the image of the barren planet showed the impact of the warning shot. A clear, unmistakable sign that humanity was making its presence known. For a moment, no one spoke. The Council representatives, who had been so sure that the humans were a manageable threat, were now visibly shaken. The Zelkai representative, Lord Zuran, was the first to react. "How dare they?" Zuran's voice was a hiss filled with fury. "This is an act of aggression. They've shown their true colors. Humanity cannot be trusted." The Drashni delegate, Varric, was quick to add his voice. "This is exactly what we feared. They will not stop until they have conquered us all." A show of strength? More like a declaration of war. Selra's expression remained calm, though their voice held a note of uncertainty. This is not what we anticipated. It is a warning, not an attack, but the implications are clear. Humanity will not back down. The room filled with heated discussions as each delegate voiced their concerns. The Mervax representative, Lyra, spoke up, her voice soft but firm. We cannot rush to judgment. Yes, humanity fired their weapon, but it was not aimed at us. This was a statement, a message. They are telling us they will not be bullied. But the message is dangerous, Lord Zurin snapped. How can we trust them if they are willing to fire a weapon in our very presence? What's next? How long before they attack us? Tarkin's words echoed in the minds of the council. If we back down now, we will lose any hope of ever being taken seriously. The human fleet had sent their message, and now the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. Back aboard the Vanguard, Tarkin watched the council's reaction unfold. He had expected anger, but the fear he saw in their eyes made his decision seem all the more justified. If the council was not going to take humanity seriously, then humanity would make sure they did. We've done it, Tarkin said to Commander Rhea, who stood beside him, her expression serious. But at what cost? She asked quietly. Tarkin didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. Humanity had made its mark. There was no turning back now. The next few hours were tense as the news of humanity's warning shot spread across the galaxy. The council members, once divided, now found themselves united in fear. The stakes had risen and no one knew how the situation would unfold. Would the council retaliate? Would they seek retribution for the perceived threat? Or would they try to negotiate, now that they understood humanity's resolve? Tarkin didn't know, but he wasn't going to wait to find out. Humanity had set the stage for a new era, and no matter the outcome, they would be at the center of it. The atmosphere in the human command center was thick with tension. Tarkin sat at his desk, his fingers drumming on the surface as he watched the feed from the Galactic Council. His mind raced, each passing minute bringing new thoughts, new fears. The warning shot had done what it was supposed to do. It had grabbed the Council's attention. But the price of that attention was becoming clearer by the second. The message from the Galactic Council had come in hours after the demonstration, a mix of anger and confusion. The message was short, direct, and filled with warnings. The Council had made its stance clear. Humanity's show of force was seen as a declaration of aggression, not a simple demonstration. The Council was no longer interested in negotiation. They had closed the door on diplomacy. Tarkin leaned back in his chair, his expression hard. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He had taken a risk, and now the outcome was here. The Council wasn't just upset, they were determined. They had sent a final ultimatum: cease all military exercises, return to the Council chamber, or face the consequences. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no going back. Tarkin stood and walked to the large viewport overlooking the stars. Earth's fleet was still positioned in the outer regions of space, ready to respond to any further provocations, but he knew that the next move would be crucial. The Council had made it clear that humanity's presence in the galaxy was not welcome if it came with such power. He turned to Rhea, who had been standing quietly by his side. Her face was set in a grim expression. "What do we do now?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of uncertainty in it. "The Council is done with us. They've made their decision." Tarkin took a deep breath. "We leave," he said, his voice low and resolute. "If they don't want us here, we won't stay. We've tried. We offered peace. We've made our intentions clear. If the Council refuses to see that, then there's no point in continuing this." Rhea looked at him, a mixture of disbelief and understanding in her eyes. "But leaving? Is that really what we should do? If we walk away, what will the galaxy think of us? What will they think of humanity?" Tarkin's gaze softened. He knew the question was more than just a matter of politics. It was about humanity's place in the universe. The human race had fought so hard to get this far. They had earned their right to be heard. But if the Council was unwilling to listen, there was little left to do. The galaxy can think what it wants. We've done our part. We're not going to beg for a seat at the table. If the council doesn't want us, then we'll go, and we'll make sure they know that we'll stand on our own without their approval. Rhea nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. And if they retaliate? What if they come for us? We'll be ready, Tarkin replied. Humanity's military may be young, but it's powerful. If the council wants war, we'll fight. But I don't think they do. They're scared, just like everyone else. They're afraid of what we might become. The order to withdraw was given. The fleet moved quickly, its ships turning away from the council's core systems, heading back toward Earth. The crew was silent, each person aware of the gravity of the decision. For many of them, this was the end of a dream of peace, of unity, of a place for humanity in the galaxy. But it was also the beginning of something else, humanity standing on its own, independent and unyielding. As the fleet made its way back, Tarkin stood at the bridge of the flagship, looking out at the stars. His thoughts were filled with the weight of what had just happened. The Council had closed its doors to humanity, but that did not mean humanity would close its doors to the galaxy. They would find their own path. They would carve out a future that was not dictated by the will of an alien council. Days passed. The human fleet continued its journey back to Earth, but the news of humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council spread quickly across the galaxy. The other species watched closely, their reactions mixed. Some believed that humanity's decision was a sign of weakness, while others saw it as a declaration of independence. There were whispers in the corridors of power. Would humanity rise, up and claim its place as the galaxy's new power? Or would they fall back into isolation, left to fend for themselves? The council itself was in chaos. The Zelkai and Drashni, who had pushed hardest for humanity's expulsion, were now dealing with the consequences of their actions. The peace they had hoped for was gone, and the galaxy was left in an uncertain state. The council, fractured and weakened, struggled to maintain control. Humanity's departure had sent shockwaves through the entire galactic community, and no one knew what would come next. Back on Earth, the human leaders gathered in the capital. Tarkin stood before them, delivering the news of their withdrawal from the council. The room was silent as the weight of the decision settled over the group. "We have done what we can," Tarkin said. "The council rejected us. They chose fear over diplomacy. Now, it's time for humanity to chart its own course. We will not beg for a place in the galaxy. We will take our place, not as guests, but as equals." The leaders nodded, some with pride, others with apprehension. It was a bold move, one that could change everything. The human race was no longer a passive participant in the galaxy. It was now a player in its own right. One of the leaders, a military officer named General Ashford, spoke up. "What if they come for us, Ambassador? What if they decide to take action against Earth?" Tarkin's gaze hardened. "Then we will defend ourselves. The fleet will be ready. We've shown them our strength, and now they will know that humanity is not to be underestimated." The room fell quiet once more. There was a sense of finality in the air. The decision had been made. Humanity would not be cowed. They would stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. Tarkin stood by the window of his office later that evening, looking out at the city below. The world was quieter now, as if holding its breath. The events of the past few days had changed everything. But Tarkin knew one thing for certain: humanity had made its mark, and no matter what came next, the galaxy would never be the same again. He felt a sense of pride, mixed with the uncertainty of the unknown future. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not to be ignored. They had walked away from the council, but they would not walk away from their destiny. The future was theirs to claim.